Hey, what's up guys? So I'm here to bring you my Yu-Gi-Oh tier list for the eras of Yu-Gi-Oh, but we're not looking at the animes themselves, we're just looking at it as an era. There's many formats inside of each era. We'll briefly touch up upon them, but I just want to say this is not an anime tier list, even though you will see images of the animes here. We're going to be ranking them. This is my tier list. A lot of other YouTube content creators have been kind of doing these tier lists of like all of the games, and I think it's kind of unfair to do some of the games because some of the Yu-Gi-Oh games, they're kind of like in between certain eras, like they have like certain cards that other ones are missing, so it's kind of hard. So I'm going to kind of do it as an era. But anyways, we're going to be going through basically kind of the history of Yu-Gi-Oh as well, going over like what was competitive in the early stages of Yu-Gi-Oh, as well as kind of like the time frames of when some of these eras actually went on. We're also going to be taking a look at a really good article that will be presented. I'll also link it. It's basically the history of the meta, but it's kind of basically here to kind of remind us early stages of Yu-Gi-Oh, like what was actually good at the time, because some of these cards we haven't seen for so many years that we have to be reminded of them. Like, you could just show me the picture and I could tell you what the effects of most of the older cards are. Sometimes when there's newer cards, we just glance over them because they're just not as viable. But there's very iconic cards. If you look at the most iconic Yu-Gi-Oh cards, they're all from like the first set of eras. But anyways, this is going to be a very lengthy video, but I'm going to link this also down below. It's a really good article over here by Nipomo here. But I just want to kind of go over the history of Yu-Gi-Oh as well. So first off, we're going to go ahead and start off with the very early stages of Yu-Gi-Oh. And I honestly just got to put it right there in the S here. This is the basic core foundation of, I think, of a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players. And by the way, feel free to comment down below what your tier list would be, but I'd recommend you guys to watch till the end. Not only for that 10-minute ad rev, but honestly, it's because there's certain things that, like, when I was making this video, I actually was like, oh, I forgot to add this. I wanted to add so much more to it. I'm trying to condense this video to be not super long, like an hour long, because there's just so much to talk about, and there's so many different formats, there's so many, like, different ban lists that we've gotten. But let's go ahead and talk about the original Yu-Gi-Oh! First off, I mean, we're talking about back before War Lady was even limited. There's some really interesting choices. Even like Jinzo, that was like one of the cards when it came out. It was like, oh my gosh, Jinzo, you better have that Snatch Steal Change of Heart. Like, there's so many things back in the day that were powerhouses, and you would see them now and you would just laugh at them, which is kind of ironic. But anyways, looking at some of the older decks, even going to the World Championship, look at what was popular in 2003. This was all Yada-Log. The reason why I give this one the S tier, this is basically where I started Yu-Gi-Oh! Like back on the Eternal Duelist Soul for the Game Boy Advance. This is mostly a tier list for not necessarily what was the most powerful at the time, but it's like how much I enjoyed it. Tier as in like the most enjoyable Yu-Gi-Oh! At its peak, basically, if you will, for me. But anyways, this is not the anime tier list, although I think the classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Would still be on S tier. Anyways, there's so many iconic cards, and going into, again, what was popular at the time, you guys can see there's a lot of things. Well, basically was Chaos Yada-Log, basically. You get the Sangan out, you go ahead, Chaos Emperor Dragon, blow up the board, summon Yada, and you just swing for him. It was annoying, but at the same time, I didn't actually get to experience the frustration of it, and I could assume that it would be very frustrating to actually have to deal with this. I mean, look at that, a side deck Magic Cylinder, right? That's dirty. But most of the decks were kind of the same. I mean, there were times you attack back when flip effect monsters were actually seeing play, and I think now, like, we just lost that whole mechanic of you didn't know what your opponent was playing. Now, of course, you know what your opponent is playing super early on into the game, whereas before you didn't exactly know what the heck they were playing. You didn't know what the face down was, unless of course you were playing in a super high tier competitive meta, which it was always going to be Fiberjaw or Cyberjaw, and you just cry every time, unless of course it was like Magician of Faith, and you'd be like, oh, okay, add back Pot of Greed, I got you. I very vividly remember going for like Cyberstein, going for like the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, thinking that was a good play. But like, again, this is where I would consider an S tier, just because it brings me back to so many memories, and I think it's just that nostalgia is really why I put it on S tier. Although I will say that there is something better, so I kind of want to move it down a tier, but at the same time, like, classic Yu-Gi-Oh is really high up there. But I say it's like in between, but I'll get into that when we move on to the next format and the next tier of what was considered good, where we moved into basically just chaos, moving into what would be considered like the GX-ish era. Looking at what was popular, I mean, it was just chaos control just for days. That's what people played. It was many times you can see like a lot of the cards that you saw previously were still there, but a lot of times it was just so strong that you would see like variants of basically just chaos. Blackluster Soldiers specifically, Thousand Eyes Restrict, very iconic cards, Scapegoat. Even Goats was very, very popular. And heck, Goats is still very, very popular these days, but there were so many broken things. But even going into what was popular, you see a lot of just chaos over here, 2005, 2006, and then we're moving basically towards the end of the GX era over here. I know for some of the timelines it can be a little bit different because, of course, there are games that come out in between timelines, and that can obviously change people's experience in the game. But for the sake of this, we'll use GX as the timeline of like 2004 to 2008-ish, which is basically over here. I mean, if you want to include GBs, that's really where the fusions came out. And then even when Lightsworn first came out, they were actually super, super nerfed. They were missing so many cards, no JD. The archetype was really underdeveloped. But this is really where I felt like I actually looked at what was competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! I met Adam Korn, Cesar Gonzalez, like all these OG Yu-Gi-Oh! Pros that they just don't play the game anymore. I really feel like GX really showed me how to play the game. It's kind of GX/5Ds, especially when you look at Gladiator Beasts. They were super popular for so long. But I would put GX pretty high up. Maybe A, maybe /B. But the thing that I didn't really like with the GX-ish era, I know it's GX/5Ds, but the Gladiator Beast and its resilienceness, like we were talking a little bit before Teledan, with it was just like solemn. It wasn't fun to play against. It almost reminds me of kind of how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is right now, where there are times where you'll just be set up with these unbreakable boards where it's like someone Laquari set 4 go. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? It can be very, very challenging sometimes and frustrating for sure to play. But I felt like this is where I really learned a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Concepts. Again, Gladiator Beast, even Lightsworns. I mean, Lightsworns, sometimes that's kind of like a coin flip duel, but I mean, there are definitely times where you can show that you know what you're doing with the deck, but sometimes it's just RNG. But moving next up into like the 5D'S era. Dude, I gotta give 5D'S the S tier 100%. And like I said, 5D'S is by far my favorite. Like, I would consider this S tier plus because it's so good. 5D'S, basically the Synchro Era, is one of my favorites. And it was like, we got these new white cards. They're new. You got a required tuner. It was a different summon mechanic. And it was so cool to just see it. And plus, there's a game that I had on the Wii where you would actually ride a motorcycle and duel at the same time. It's absolutely ridiculous, but I gotta say, 5D'S is definitely one of my favorites. I mean, we're talking from 2009 to 2015. Again, kind of using this kind of as a guideline because it's kind of hard to gauge what people consider the certain timelines. But again, moving out of like the chaos that every single deck was playing, like just to remind you some of the decks that were in this era. Synchro Cat, this was a very, very popular deck that would just basically OTK you every single time. It was so OP, and then eventually it got nerfed. And Black Wings were super popular for a very, very long time as well. And I remember Machina Fortress, this card was so insane that you could discard itself, counting as one of the materials. And then going into like the Synchro Era, I mean, Plant Synchro was one of the coolest archetypes like ever, by far, because it wasn't an archetype. You just kind of just played some of these cards. Infernities, that was when Infernities took off. Also, X-Sabers, very, very competitive. And then Frog FTK was like, yo, I'm the best deck. I'm winning Worlds. And that's something that was kind of unfortunate to run into. But the thing is, it says although the set didn't introduce significant archetypes, it did add important staple cards like Solemn Warning and Veiler. I mean, Warden doesn't see too much play, but the hand traps, really, that's where the hand traps really took off. It was just Valor, really, at that time, before we got the Ghost Ogre and, of course, Ashe. It was very iconic. I think that 5D'S was very, very strong. Gateway, I'm sure a lot of you guys remember that. Then we got all the hero support, Reborn Tengu, and then this is kind of moving towards the next era, which would be where we got the Exceeds. Even the Agents, very, very strong deck, and kind of what was popular at that time. We had Blackwing, still kind of in between-ish eras. We still had some GBs, Frog FTK, and of course what won Worlds was technically Frog FTK, but that was kind of a degenerate deck for most people. Like, there was a time where Hanawana spiked up in price, because that was like, if you didn't draw Hanawana, okay, game. Like, it was kind of annoying, but I still think 5D'S is my favorite, and I think amongst the community, I think a lot of people will consider 5D'S to be their personal favorite. Next up, though, we're moving into the Zexal era. That's where we had the Exceeds, and for the most part, okay, again, this is not a tier list on the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, because I'm gonna say, most people be like, yo, Zexal, that's like F tier as far as the anime goes. I honestly have not watched every single Yu-Gi-Oh anime, but as far as like the Exceed goes, I actually really liked them. I thought that was a really cool mechanic, and we're kind of moving into, again, if we go to the era of, no, we're not Arv-V yet, but if we're looking at the era of like Zexal, again, if we just go back to the history here, Dark World was one of the decks that won one of the bigger events in California. I remember that when, you remember Dino Rabbits, Inzectors, those were the popular decks at the time, and the wind-up loop, that was something super annoying. Inzectors ended up winning Worlds, but I very, very vividly remember this format. We also had the Chaos Dragons introduced back into the game, Shockmaster, even where we basically first came out with like the Megalo. There was also the Fire Fist coming out in the game, and I remember very, very vividly, and I think a lot of people remember the ultimate deck, the Dragon Rulers. This is a very iconic format. I would say that this format specifically brought a lot of people back to the game, and I know a lot of people that were budget players were really upset about this format, where it's basically Spellbooks and Dragon Rulers, even Yugiohs saw some play, kind of in between. But then we really saw the artifacts coming out into the game, and that's where we saw the hat come out into the game as well, which was really cool. In fact, if we look at what was popular kind of in this era timeline here, Inzectors were just absolutely super, super dominant of a deck. And then again, Dragon Rulers taking the game. If you didn't have like the Blaster and another Fire to go ahead and pop the Chowgan, it was a GG, man. But I think this is a very iconic format too, and I would consider it very, very middle-ish ground. The reason why I consider it middle-ish ground is because a lot of times people would complain about like just not being able to play, and I totally understand. Do you guys remember when 6th Sense just came into the game? Like, they definitely promoted that set with 6th Sense, because there was nothing. I believe it was like Joey's or something like that. It was a set that, like, without 6th Sense, like, and it was a short print too, which was super, super dirty of them to do us like that, because again, that was like the only card that was really good out of that set. I mean, definitely you could lose to 6th Sense, and that's why, specifically for that reason, and like the lockouts and Spellbook of Judgment, who made that card, that's why I put it a little bit lower. But I really do want to put it up here. But again, 6th Sense, man, I just was not a fan of that at all. But anyways, moving onward to the next era, which of course is going to be the Arv-V. So I remember this format a lot, like Shadal's, that's where we first got the Burning Abyss, that's where we first really had those Pendulum decks. I think the only Pendulum deck that really took off, I mean, besides, of course, the one that got absolutely destroyed with the Monkey Board, that deck got destroyed so fast that I feel like it was kind of unfair. Like, they released it, and they sold it, and then they were just like, oh, by the way, guys, it's unplayable. With what, like, it was less than 2 weeks, if I remember correctly. I feel like that was a horrible thing to do, but I really dislike Pendulums. I mean, even though Pendulums never really took off, I mean, at that time, I mean, Klees technically were one of the Pendulum decks that I would say had a lot of potential. Plus, the Magispector was a super frustrating deck to play against, because for a newer returning Yu-Gi-Oh player, I remember hearing this all the time. That's why that Vine that I made blew up, where it was like, you just throw down your Pendulum scale and you just summon a bunch of monsters. and then the other guy's like, what the heck is going on? And then you get rid of them, and they're like, okay, summon all of them again. And that's really where Yu-Gi-Oh took, I would say, a big downward spike for a lot of people. They didn't like the pendulums. In fact, I still to this day don't like the pendulum mechanic, and it had so much backlash, especially in Japan. Eventually, obviously, they changed how the pendulum worked. Then you would have like less zones, and basically with the, of course, introduction of link monsters, it heavily got nerfed. And it's because, I'm not sure if it's 100% because of player backlash that they really disliked it. In fact, Yu-Gi-Oh took a downward spike in sales. Well, as far as I'm aware of, I've talked to different card companies when I was working with them, and I would always ask them, where did Yu-Gi-Oh peak for you? And a lot of them would say 5D'S, and a lot of them would say at its lowest point, it was during pendulums. It might have been because people started, you know, just playing Yu-Gi-Oh online. That could definitely be a factor. But I think that a lot of people dislike the pendulum mechanic. I want to look at this format, right, where I'm like, okay, the Necros was pretty fun to play, but when you were playing against it, sometimes it was frustrating. Even playing against like the Ritual Beast could be very frustrating at times, even though that deck doesn't really see any play. But this is where we had the Perform Mages. I just dislike pendulum mechanics so much, like just in general. And I remember Cosmos, and it's not that I really disliked these decks, because again, pendulums, I mean, with the exception of the Magispectors and I guess like Cleese, I just dislike pendulums so much, and that's why I really want to consider it like a bottom tier for me. But that's, again, it's not just because of what was considered meta at the time, but it's basically just that I dislike the mechanic. I don't know, I could just go on a rant for a day talking about how much I dislike original pendulum mechanic. I just really disliked it. That's why I'm putting it on the bottom tier. Now, going into what we have kind of, I guess we could kind of talk kind of briefly about this. Again, it wasn't really ever considered super annoying for the competitive scene, with the exception of maybe Magispectors. But we're talking about like the, well, actually one was like the True King, the Yangzing. Technically it was, obviously with Worlds, they always use that like special little ban list that they have. And on top of that, in 2016, we had like it was so rigged for Blue Eyes to win. It was probably to promote the movie coming out. But like they made a special ban list, so like I wouldn't really say 2016 to really reference that kind of a list of Blue Eyes. Yeah, that's definitely the most competitive here. But even looking at the future, which is basically what we're in kind of right now, which is of course VRains. Now, the thing with VRains and what is actually considered, like, I guess, competitive in this era would be like Trickster, Altergeist. Goki is kind of done, but it's still considered in that era here. We're talking about kind of Link monsters in general. I really came back kind of into the game physically in VRains, because I basically left Pendulum format as far as playing physically. Like, I just basically played online. I think a lot of people just kind of did that as well. But with VRains here, like, I want to put it like up somewhere towards like an A, because I like how innovative certain crazy deck combinations are, right? Okay, well, it won't let me move it back down here. But anyways, I want to talk a little bit more about it, and I'll tell you where I'm placing it. But like, I want to move it up higher because there's so many interesting interactions, but it destroyed some of these older decks. Absolutely made it so like they were like unplayable because you needed those extra monster zones. Like, yeah, you could pull off combos with synchros that are just like 1 or 2 card combos to make Quasar Dragon, but it's very difficult. It basically made a lot of decks obsolete. Like have you tried playing Counter Curry with this? It's so difficult, and I really felt like they pushed people so hard towards this new mechanic, while a lot of people were like, I don't want to play them. Like, if you went into Synchro Era or another era with Exceeds or Zexal, if you didn't want to play them, hey, that's cool, man. You don't even have to play them. Although, you know, the new stuff is usually going to be better. That's just how it is. But a lot of people left the game specifically for that reason. And then also on top of that, the non-interaction in it, the amount of games that happen these days. I mean, a lot of you guys loved my Yu-Gi-Oh video. It's at about 500,000 views now of why people quit Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's the same stuff that you're seeing almost half of your game. It's Orcus, and I'm going to go ahead and set 2 things to negate your monster effects, the double Fog Blade, and then I'm going to set Crescendo, I'm going to activate the Field Spin. All this is just basically off of 2 cards. And then on top of that, I'm going to go ahead on your turn, since I have the Field Spell, I'm going to activate this. It's like, dude, do you want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or do you want to just play Solitaire? That's how I feel right now about Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think a lot of players feel the same way. But then again, I'm like, you know what? there are a lot of diverse decks, so I want to move it back up. So it's kind of hard for me to kind of really gauge where I want to put this, because again, I kind of want to put it on such a low point simply because the non-interaction games. And like, if this person sets up this insane board and the person goes, okay, I force your one negation, let's say for example, like Crescendo, or and then I go evenly match. Is it fun for the other player? The player's like, I set this whole thing up and I lose to one card. Wow. But that's just kind of how the game is. And like, I've almost accepted it as like, it's game one, whatever, move on to game two. But then like, you draw bad, you don't draw the hand trap, your opponent is now going first and he sets up this board, you don't draw into your evenly match. I just feel like this huge sense of frustration. And while I was playing at locals, I was playing dinosaurs and I made basically a full board. And I matched up against a very young kid, alright? And I don't know if he just got into the game or if he played for a really long time. But like, I saw, like, I literally just activated Dragonic Diagram and I destroyed Baby Cerosaurus, and I just saw him go like this. Because I explained exactly what was going on and the combo. But then, like, the next turn, I just happened to have the same card, and I just did it, and he was just frustrated. And I felt bad, because I'm like, I kind of want to give this kid the satisfaction of just winning. I mean, the tournament prize pool didn't really matter anyways. It was just an OTS pack. But the thing is that, like, at the same time, like, am I really gonna not open up that OTS pack? But at the same time, like, I just felt bad, because, like, that's just how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. I mean, do you say GG shake their hand when you just, like, literally couldn't play? I don't know. I'm kind of mixed with VRains, where to put it, because I'm like, there's a lot of different decks that I can play, but then there's Mystic Mind, and I'm like, okay, I'll put it down here. We're making a new tier. We gotta go ahead and add another tier here, because Mystic Mind. I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about VRains. Again, this is not an anime tier list, but that's how I currently feel about the meta and the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! As far as like a tier list where I would kind of rank them as far as how much fun I had in the game. But anyways, this is my tier list. I would love to know yours down below. Where would you put them as far as the tier list? I just feel like, I guess like the least amount of frustration, right? But definitely 5D'S is 100% my favorite. Like, but this one I'm really mixed on. Like, I kind of want to put it like, well, there's a lot of diverse decks, but I'm like, oh wait, hold on. Are you going to actually be able to play them realistically? Like, yeah, you could run Agent Venus and anything, throw a Sarah Yugioh and open up these crazy boards. But is that really going to happen against Orcus? Probably not. You're going to get stopped. There's so many hand traps. It feels like a lot of card advantage doesn't exist. When you go back to the OG players, Cesar Gonzalez, Adam Korn, Belito, they would talk about card advantage and like all these things. And like a lot of these stuff that like made Yu-Gi-Oh! So great with this critical thinking, it's just removed. It's like, oh, one card combos, go ahead. I don't know, man. Like I said, I'm mixed on this one. I can't give you. I'm torn between putting it on B and like so low that you don't even see it on this list because of the non-interaction. But anyways, I feel like I ranted long enough. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know your tier list down below in the comment section below. But thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like on it. And if you're new here, hit the subscribe button. Also, we should do more tier lists. I think it's just a fun topic. Man, this video is only 22 minutes. Okay, good. I got it under half an hour. That was my goal. But anyways, thanks for watching. Peace out. And we'll do some more tier lists in the future. And if you have any suggestions for tier lists, I would love to know what you guys want to see a tier list on in the future. But anyways, thanks for watching. And peace out.